occasionally I had to fly with them because there'd be a malfunction that they couldn't find except in the air, and that was always fun too. I don't know what else to tell you, but I was there for 23 months, and then I got pulled back to the States after the 23 months, and my wife was waiting for me, only she wasn't my wife yet. But my girlfriend, my fiancée, we had known each other from 3rd grade on, and they didn't have you couldn't telephone back and forth like today. You had to do everything by letter. So we put together a marriage by letter, and 6 days after I got off the boat in San Francisco, she and I were married. And after we were married, I was still in the Air Force, so they had sent me to Hunter Air Force Base at Savannah, Georgia. And while I was there, they came to me and said, "Are you going to stay in the Air Force because the B-29 is obsolete and what you're doing is obsolete? If you stay in, you have to enlist for X number of years to go back to training. And which would you like? Would you like to be released, or are you going to enlist for more time?" And I said, "Get the papers, I want to be released." So that's my story.
Thank you, Sergeant Steitner. Next, we have Sergeant Tom Ford from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. With the 1A draft number, Sergeant Ford knew he was going to be drafted in the spring of 1969. So in June of 1968, he volunteered for a 2-year enlistment. Just like Staff Sergeant Worsley, who's not here today, unfortunately, Sergeant Ford wanted to be able to decide which branch of the armed forces he would be involved with, and he knew if he was drafted, the government would throw him into whatever branch they needed the most men in. He knew that he did not want to be in the Navy, so when he enlisted at the age of 19, he joined the Army. He attended basic training at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and then went on to artillery training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. For a short leave at home, he arrived in Vietnam on December 4th, 1968. He was then assigned to 1st Cavalry Division in the 3rd Corps. The main objective for his division was to block the Northern Vietnamese Army, or the NVA, infiltration and supply routes destined for Saigon. His area of operation was out on the Cambodian border, in the bush, setting up fire bases and providing artillery support for the infantry units. With that, I'll let him tell you the rest.
Hello, folks. I think I'm going to sit down and do this. Yeah, when I knew I was going to get drafted, and my friend's granddad ran the draft board. So he told me, well, you got to, probably March of '69, you have to go ahead and get drafted. And I thought, well, I'll pick. I went in on a 2-year enlistment, which was, they just did that then to get people in, because a lot of guys didn't want to spend 4 years. So I went in the Army, and I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for basic training. And when I think back on that, I'm thinking, maybe that wasn't, July and August basic training in Fort Gordon, Georgia wasn't the smartest move I ever made, because it was so hot. And so I had 8 weeks at Fort Gordon, basic training. Then a certain group of us went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for artillery training. We was there for another 8 weeks. Then we got sent home on leave, and everybody that was in my unit at Fort Sill got orders for Vietnam. So around the 1st of December, I flew to Seattle, Washington, at a place out there called Fort Lewis, and they made you take malaria pills, start you out on malaria pills, and if you were allergic to them, got sick off of them, you didn't go to Vietnam. That's one of the main reasons they did it. And while I was there, I noticed these three guys were always hanging around together and whispering around, and we were getting ready to leave. The next day we were going to go to get on a plane to fly to Nam. And they came up to me and they said, "Hey, we're leaving tonight." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, we're going to Canada. So they said, "You want to go along?" And I said, "No, I'm just going to follow through with this." So next morning I got up, they were gone. They were, I don't know how they got off base or whatever, but they went to Canada. So then we flew over to Nam, stopped at Guam for a refuel, and I noticed on both sides of the airstrip with B-52s, it was amazing. They flew bombing runs for Vietnam out of there. I got into Ban Hoa Air Base, flew into there, and I remember we flew in air conditioned and stuff was on in the aircraft, and they opened that door and it was just like a blast of hot air hitting you, and it was just amazing, and I can still smell it. It was like a mixture of garbage and diesel fuel. And when I smell them two things together, it takes me right back to there because it stunk over there. We went into a replacement battalion at that time. And what would you do is they would tell you which unit you were going to go to. And my buddy, Jim Engelmeyer, and I was there. And I had met him at the airport in Pittsburgh, flew down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, was there for a little bit. We spent basic training together. We spent AIT together at Fort Sill. And we went over in the same aircraft to Vietnam. It was amazing. I mean, stuff like this, you guys know, that's a 1 in a million shot. And so we got split up at Ban Hoa. They told me I'm going to go to the 1st Cavalry Division. And it was up in 2 Corps, which was Central Highlands. And I got up there and we went through jungle school. We had to jump off of a tower, rappel down, do stuff like that. I don't know why, we never did that when we got back to the field. And shortly thereafter, I got on an airplane, we went down to 3 Corps, which was the area around Saigon. And they had, our main job was, we were always out on the Cambodian border, and we built fire bases out there, and we supported our infantry units that were blocking the NVA from going into Saigon. That was their main objective. And they were well equipped. Most of the units that we did run into some Viet Cong, but it was mostly NVA units. And one thing about Vietnam, you just didn't know who you were fighting, because the Viet Cong, they would farm during the day or do whatever. They'd work on the bases. They might be your barber. And at night, they were setting up reflectors for mortars to come in on you. And so I got in the country, I went to my unit. I was on a 105 howitzer. There were 6 guns on our battery. The howitzer could shoot a 43-pound projectile about 7 miles. So they were pretty accurate, and we covered anybody who wanted help. We had to call for, another thing we had to do is we had to call for clearance. We couldn't drop artillery in on a graveyard or a rubber plantation. Michelin had rubber plantations over there. And if you shot a tree and it leaked, it cost the government $75. So we had to pay for that in war, which didn't make a lot of sense. And So it started my year of building fire bases. We actually built 11 fire bases. We would go in, they'd set us down. We did all our moving by helicopter, everything. I never rode in a truck in Vietnam. They take us out in helicopters with their guns underneath, where they drop them down at the right place. We get down off of them and start setting up the gun, get ready to shoot. Then we'd start building our protection, which is a half a culvert, and then like 3 or 4 layers of sandbags on top, in front and back. I wasn't in Vietnam too long, and I got wounded. I got hit by a mortar, me and 2 other guys. We were out shooting at night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the mortars started coming in, and unfortunately we were the first ones there. And when you shoot at night, they called it H&I, harassment and interdiction. We always used to have to wear a flak vest. So I have a flak vest on, and that's what saved my life. It didn't stop the shrapnel, but it slowed it down. So I was able to live through that. And I went to, I got medevaced out of there on a medevac helicopter. And then I went to, I was there for about a week. And then I went to Cameron Bay for rehabilitation called the Sixth Convalescent Center. And while I was there, we had all kinds of guys there. We had Australians, we had ROC troops from Republic of Korea, our guys. And I was in a ward, Quonset hut ward, and they had like wire up and they had sheets, so you have a little bit of privacy. And I was laying in bed, and I heard this guy's voice, and I thought, that guy has a distinct voice. I knew I heard it from somewhere. So he was coming down the aisle, and he popped around and looked at me around my sheet there, and it was Jimmy Stewart. And I said, and he said, "Where are you from, soldier?" I said, "Pennsylvania." He said, "Me too, Indiana, Pennsylvania." We talked a little bit and chatted, and he went on. What a nice guy, and what a great thing for him to do to visit us in the hospital. The other 2 guys that got hit with me, one went to El Paso, Texas, and one went to a Navy ship in Japan. And I went back out to the field, and back out to St. Medford. Life on the fire bases were monotonous, a lot of work, shooting, and every once in a while just sheer terror, because they would, when they hit you, they would shoot maybe 200-300 mortars in on you. And then they would start coming into the perimeter, in through the wire. And so as soon as the mortars stopped, we had to get out there, get on them guns, and repel the attacks. And this buddy of mine, Jim Engelmeyer, again, we ended up in the same battery. He got there about a day before me, and when I was walking up off of the helicopter pad, I heard my name. And I thought, who in the heck's up here would know my name? And here was Engelmeyer. And unfortunately, he got killed June the 12th, '69. He was from Green Tree area in Pittsburgh, and what a great guy. And he got killed in a fire base attack. Ironically, it was called LZ Joy. Like I said, it was a lot of work. One of the things Miss Lemon likes me to tell about is one time, we never had anything cold. The only thing we'd have cold is every once in a while you get a couple of beers, and they give you a little block of ice, and you'd roll the cans, and it would it'd cool the beer down pretty quick. Well, they told us that there was going to be something special happening. So they bought the chopper ride with the mail, and when he landed, they had these insulated, like oval canisters, and they brought out ice cream for us. And I thought, now this is a treat, because we never had ice cream in Knoch. In fact, we just never had anything cold. So, you know, bless their heart, they did something nice for us. So we all got like a quart of ice cream and a spoon and stuff, and got out of there. It was probably the most awful ice cream I ever ate in my life. It was so bad. I don't know why, I don't know how they made it or what they did, but it was bad. So we all stood around and looked at each other like, what are we gonna do with this stuff? So we had these containers, so we threw the containers into that insulated container and stuck our feet in it. And it was like, just sat down there and like, oh, that feels so good. And that was a funny little story. We would get, most of the time we ate sea rations. Some of them were dated from Korea. We were still using the old type. And then later on we got what they call lurps, which was a plastic bag that you pour hot water into and mix it up. And we also had, if we wanted to cook anything, we would barter, back in the rear, would barter, and if we take like guns or whatever we captured from the dead, and sell it to the Air Force guys or the Army guys that was in the rear, and we'd get C4, and it was a plastic explosive. We get a chunk, and you'd knock a little chunk off, you'd light it on fire, and you could heat up a canteen cup full of coffee with it. They didn't like us to do that very much, but we did anyhow. This picture here, that's me standing in the center, sitting, and this is live ammunition. It spells Phyllis there. Those are mortar tails that we pick up and spelled out the name of our LZ. But this stuff should have never came onto base. For some reason, after we got hit all the time there, and they would go out and sweep the area, and they used to blow it in place. Well, some knucklehead from the fire base said, I want to see it. So they brought it on. I remember I was sitting on, I was in my gun section, and I remember the Jeep going by, and it had a trailer full of this stuff. B-40s that had mortars, RPGs, and yeah, I thought that's pretty crazy. So they got all this stuff together after this picture was taken, and one day it blew, and all this stuff is still on the fire base. 2 of our guys got killed, and 7 grunts, 7 infantry. It should have never, ever happened. And it was just stupidity on the part of the brass that was on the fire base. We were at a place called Budok, which is a special forces camp about 4 clicks off the border, 4 kilometers off the border. And we had went out to the border and put these little things that were listening units. You could tell if troops went by or whatever. And they thought we might be getting hit by NVA arms, which never happened over there, but they wondered about it. So the Supreme Commander of Vietnam was General Creighton Abrams. And he came out to the fire base. I didn't know who he was. And I was sitting in my gun section working on the gun, and my battery commander came in and said, hey, Forrest, put a shirt on and go over there and stand beside that Jeep. So I did, and I see this guy kind of, General Early was Major General Early was our commander for the first cav, and this smaller guy was walking beside him. And I looked at him, and I started counting the stars on him, and this guy was a 4-star. And here was General Abrams, the big guy in Vietnam. And he had General Vic, and he had his pants just full of cigars. He loved smoking cigars, he loved giving them out, and it was a real treat. I was hoping I'd get one just for something to remember him by, but by that time, they were over, so I didn't get one. So I get in front seat. Command Sergeant Baker, first cav, got beside me riding shotgun. And the 2 generals were in the back seat. So Abrams didn't want to fly up to the district capital. So we drove up. And I looked up, and there was just choppers everywhere. It was great. We had a lot of cover. We get up there, choppers go away. General Abrams goes into Hooch, talks to some of the locals, and Command Sergeant Major said, "Okay, Sergeant," said, "take the Jeep back to Budok." I said, "Well, is anybody going to go with me?" He said, "Nah, you'll be all right." So I'd go like 7 clicks across country, myself in a Jeep, and well, you just didn't know what was going to happen. And I said, "Okay," so I jumped in and drove back to Budok. Thank God nothing happened. While we were at Budok, I was up on radio once one night, and I heard this screaming going on. I thought, what the heck's going on? So we had we had these civilian people that worked for the Green Berets that were called Rough Puffs, RFPF, and it was some kind of a civilian guard duty thing. And they lived in these bunkers on the base with their families. So I heard the screaming going on, so I walked over and you could see the cracks and stuff in the bunker. And I looked down and there was a woman in there having a baby. I went, better back off from this. So I went back and sat back on the wall, and I think they heard me scuff my feet. And about an hour later, half an hour later, here comes this Vietnamese guy with a little baby. And he was holding her, and she was, just a tiny little thing. And he brought her over to show it to me. I thought that was so nice. And at the time I thought, here's this little baby girl, and look at what she was born into, what she's going to have to put up with, being in a poor situation. I felt sorry for the little thing. I'm sure I hope and pray that she made it. We had another fire base where they hit us with heavy mortars, and we lost some guys there. We lost a guy from Greenville, which is around this area somewhere, and we had our share of. We lost about 20% of the battery over the year through KIA and wounded in action, and I went on. Now, you guys can appreciate this. When I got in Vietnam in December of '68, I had 9 months that I never talked on the telephone. We just never got a chance to call our family. And when I got hit, even in the hospital, they had what they call Mars hookup, but they were sketchy and you really couldn't use them. And I just never got to talk to my parents. And but finally, when I went to Taiwan, and I did get to speak to my mom and dad. That was really nice. Thanksgiving Day, '69, we had a hot meal brought out to us in the choppers, and my battery commander, he said, "All right, Sergeant," he said, you're leaving the field today." And I went, "Hallelujah," and I made it. And he said, "Just go back with the chopper with the food stuff on it." And I went back and I started doing all the paperwork and getting out of the country. And the night before we were going to leave, we got on the buses. We were in Long Binh, and we had to go cross country to Benoit Air Base. And we had already turned our weapons in. We didn't have, I had carried a .45. I had a Car 15, and we turned all that in. Here we were in a wreck. Some Vietnamese garbage truck driver smacked into us. It was in the middle of the night. He didn't have any lights on, and we're thinking we're going to get ambushed. Well, one guy on the bus had a weapon, but within, I'd say, a minute, we had a helicopter around us. And I'll never forget going into that terminal, and we were just a rough-looking bunch, and we had the they would fly in at night, the civilian aircraft. They'd get off. Here comes these guys in. It's December. They're white as a sheet. You got brand new green uniforms on. They were our replacements. And it was just, it was an amazing time. We were screaming and yelling. They were like, oh, flying. And so I got on, we got to Freedom Bird. We went back to the world. We went back to, we flew through Hawaii and landed at Oakland, California. I think it's called Travis Air Force Base. So we get in there, and they said, eat all you want, shower all you want. I thought I had a tan. But until I got out of that shower after about the 10th time, I was starting to look a little bad. It was just dirt. And so we got they gave us dress screens, and also, I had carried my bag over. They made you carry your duffel bag to Vietnam with all your stuff in it. Well, we put it all on supply units because we couldn't have anything out on the fire base. So one night a rocket came in and burned that baby down. There was nothing left. There was all kinds of stuff that guys bought from the from R&R, these ACI tape recorders, and it got burned up. And I had a bunch of get well cards from when I got wounded. But when I left Vietnam, all I had was a ditty bag, but you know what? That was okay. I was getting out of there. So the next day, we got on a bus, and I'm thinking, why does this bus have wire over the windows? And the guy said, you'll see. So we went out to the front gate, and we're getting ready to go, and there's these anti-war protesters out there. And they were throwing rocks at us, and eggs, and just screaming and yelling at us. And the guy said, I said, you know what? I said, you let us off this bus. I said, we can clean this mess up in about 5 minutes. And the guy said, no, don't even approach him, don't do anything. So we went to the other side of the base, and we got a taxi cab, went over to San Francisco International. And that's the only time, after I got back from Nam, that I ever had a run-in with, I never got spit on or anything like that, but it was, you get the cold shoulder, you know, and I told them guys, I said, you know, don't be mad at us. We didn't volunteer to go over there. We're just doing what we're told. And if you want to throw rocks and stuff at somebody, throw it to politicians. After that, I went to, I went home for a month. I grew up in Bedford County, and I went down to Fort Stewart, Georgia, spent the remaining time down in Georgia. And we had a small battery down there. We were actually shooting for Vietnamese helicopter pilots so they could learn how to spot artillery. I got out of there, got out of the Army. I worked for Pittsburgh Plate Glass for 13 years. Ended up retiring from the Postal Service. I got a wife, Kimberly, and a great daughter, Shelley, and I made it, and I'm just so thankful for all that. And I'd like to just close with this. You know, like the gentleman, the World War II vet said, you guys are going to be running this country pretty soon. Just make sure that if you get into a fight, one thing, don't ever get into a civil war fight between two factions in a country. Just, and if need be, if you need to protect it, make sure that we have something in it, that we're not just going out and doing fly-by-night raids over some people that we don't have anything to do with. And I just want to thank Lauren for having us, and the school for having us, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
To our next veteran, I would like to recognize this winner of this year's Voice of Democracy contest. Since 1947, the Voice of Democracy has been the Veterans of Foreign Wars, or the VFW's premier scholarship program. Each year, nearly 80,000 high school students compete for more than $2 million in scholarships and incentives. Students compete by writing and recording an audio essay on an annual patriotic theme. This year's theme was Why is the Veteran Important? Students in the high school were encouraged to enter this year's contest, and while there were many great entries, one essay stood out above the rest. Freshman Hannah Butler won this year's contest, and as a way to honor her accomplishment, as well as honor the veterans in our presence today, we would like to take the time to allow her to deliver her essay. Please help me welcome Hannah to the stage.
Thank you, Ms. Lemon. And firstly, I'd just like to thank the veterans for coming and thank you for your service. It really does mean a lot to everyone. So, why is the veteran important? The word veteran is a broad term, or at least that is what Americans have boiled it down to be. For so long, we've pictured a mass of hardened warriors wearing tactical camouflage as if they're all the same and they're no more than their military ranking. But we fail to ask ourselves what matters. Is there a deeper meaning to the importance of a veteran? I believe there is. Veterans are so much more than people who have engaged in combat. They're medics, cooks, technicians, police, instructors, and so much more. When they retire from the armed forces, their stories don't end. Veterans have helped America flourish both in and out of the service. Veterans are well-rounded workers. After they learn everything about life and working in the service, they can apply the skills to what they pursue after retirement. About half of veterans decide to keep working after their time in the armed forces. Instead of doing labor work, some veterans decide to settle down and work to inspire the people around them. The VFW is composed of veterans who have agreed to be part of a nonprofit organization to help serve their communities. The generosity of those who decide to continue to serve their brothers and sisters after defending their country with everything they have is truly why we have such a powerful patriotic society in America. Patriotism sparked a flame in my heart when I was little. I learned that a grandfather of mine had served in the Korean War, and that made me want to indulge in the ideas behind the military. After learning all of the selfless things my family has done for my country, the idea of giving my life to those around me has inspired me ever since. The veterans around me influence me to be better, and that's one of the best effects to have on others. This effect is also communal. The bigger the scale, the better. Veterans lead by example and promote humility and discipline. Patriotism is closely knitted with personal experiences, so it's important to have a community with connections to veterans. Going along with personal experiences, each veteran has their own. Hearing veterans tell their stories is awe-inspiring regardless of deployment location, the severity of their operation, or even if they left the reserve or not. The point is, veterans are individual personalities with different stories and experiences, just like other American citizens. It is important to acknowledge the sacrifice made by the veterans because they all took an oath and agreed to put their lives on the line so Americans can stay free for as long as possible. Even after they leave the service, they are still willing to help others in any way they can. The selflessness demonstrated by veterans makes Americans proud of where they come from. Keeping their stories alive is the least we can do to repay all they have done and are currently doing for citizens. To conclude, veterans are the root, heart, and soul of patriotism in American culture. They put themselves at risk for months and even years on end so Americans can live in liberty. The stories they once lived through inspire people to keep their memories alive and enable citizens to be better every day. Their charitable and selfless mindsets are the foundation of all things that happen inside the United States